One. Good afternoon, my name is Brianna Garcia. Today I'm going to tell you all how the unsinkable Titanic sunk, along with details about the ship before it sunk, what happened the night it sank, and the Titanic today. There's a lot of details I'd like to cover, so let's start from the beginning. Firstly, if you don't know what the Titanic was, from byhistory.com, Titanic from history.com, updated March 10th of 2020. The Titanic was a luxury British steamship that sank in the early hours of April 15th, 1912, after striking an iceberg, leading to the deaths of more than 1,500 passengers and crew. This is a picture of the Titanic before it sank, before they set off. Right? The Titanic set off on its course on April 10th, 1912, and they were traveling from Southampton, England to New York City. So that's the ship, they were taking off. The Titanic was also known as RMS Titanic. RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship. Along with mail, there were many different people on the Titanic. From Tarshish Lauren, searching for the Titanic, could the most famous shipwreck ever be found? From Storyworks, Volume 28, Issue 1 of September 2020. On board were more than 2,200 people, bejeweled millionaires, and hopeful immigrants, passengers from all around the world. With all those people in mind, there were not enough lifeboats for all the passengers on board. Moving on to what happened the night the iceberg hit the Titanic. The Titanic was given multiple warnings by many different ships that there were icebergs in the area. However, the captain did not alter their course enough to avoid them and also did not alter their speed. They were going very fast. According to Funk and Wagnalls, Titanic Disaster, New World Encyclopedia from 2018, the ship had been proclaimed unsinkable because of its 16 watertight compartments, but the iceberg punctured 5 of them, one more than had been considered possible in any accident. So here's a picture to demonstrate why the Titanic could not stay afloat. So these are all the compartments on the bottom, and 5 of them were being flooded with water. Now because the ones in the front were being flooded with water, it started pulling the bow underwater. If you don't know what the bow of the ship is, it's this front part right here. And it started pulling it down until it broke in half, and the bow went down first, and then the stern was pointing up in the water. With that in mind, there was still a lot of passengers and crew on the ship when it went down. As for the lifeboats and people on the lifeboats, the crew were asked to evacuate women and children first. However, they were boarding the ships with a lot less people than they could fill. According to Amy Tikkanen from Titanic Britannica of October 15, 2020, although the Titanic's number of lifeboats exceeded that required by the British Board of Trade, its 20 boats could carry only 1,178 people, far short of the total number of passengers. This problem was exacerbated by lifeboats being launched well below capacity. So the lifeboats could carry a little bit over 60 people, but the crew were only sending about 30 people on each boat. So they could still fit a lot of people on the boats, but because they skipped drills for the Titanic that day before they set off, the crew was very unaware of what to do in this situation. With that result, only 705 people were saved in the lifeboats. Now, the Titanic had sent off calls for help, for distress calls, but the closest ship that had responded to their distress call was the Carpathia, but it was still 3 hours away from their location. In the end, more than 1,500 died. Now, because the people in the lifeboats were scared that if they would go back for more people in the water, that they would be swarmed and taken down, they waited a little while, but in the end, 1,500 still died, and many people did not make it out the water. Lastly, the Titanic today. A lot of people were inspired by the Titanic. The Titanic had inspired many films, and a lot of people who were on the Titanic, they came out a couple years later and they wrote a lot of books and shared their experiences. One of the people who was inspired by the Titanic was Robert Ballard. He was very inspired to find the ship, not for money, but because he just wanted to find the ship to give the people who died a little bit of peace. So although he knew finding the ship was going to be hard, because when the ship went down, it drifted. So where it crashed, the last known location, the ship was not there. It drifted along, and even the front part of the ship and the end of the ship weren't together anymore. They were spread out miles away from each other. So although it was complicated, and he knew it would be complicated, Ballard's journey of searching only had some complications. From Tarshish Loren searching for the Titanic, could the most famous shipwreck ever be found? From Storyworks, Volume 28, Issue 1 of September 2020. In 1977, he and a team set out for the North Atlantic. Hopes were high, but then, just days into the voyage, a 50-ton piece of his ship came loose and crashed down $600,000 worth of sonar and other borrowed equipment, plunged into the sea. Although he had, these complications, he still made a second attempt. And on his second attempt, he used a remote-controlled submersible called Argo. Argo contained TV cameras, sonar equipment, and powerful lights. He used this to send it down into the water to locate the Titanic. And Argo did find the Titanic in 1985. Here's a picture of the ship today, underwater. All in all, the Titanic sunk because it hit an iceberg on April 15th of 1912. Although it's very sad, with the Titanic sinking, we all learned a lot of lessons, especially ships from this day. A lot of them have made better designs and prepared more so that incidents like this don't happen in the future, and that they have better safety regulations. And that's it. Thank you very much.